Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. My guest today is running for the school board in San Ramon Valley Unified School District. She has well over a decade's experience working with all different aspects of the district, and as a volunteer, she was fantastic. The level of detail and information that she's able to provide, especially to a layperson, is really tremendous. She does a fantastic job of outlining some of the different major hurdles and some of the things that in my mind should be considered scandals within the district. And without further ado, the woman, the myth, the legend, Shelley Clark. Whatever happens to be said, because I feel like we're already jiving and having a good conversation, we can catch. So I'm sorry, you were saying?
I think there's definitely some issues, and some things stand out to me more than other things. I would like to tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm running, if we could do that.
We can talk about whatever you want.
We can go into whatever we want to talk about, whether outstanding issues with the district or any other subjects.
Right. You've been at this for decades. Like
yeah.
you had a drive to help the district and the individual schools forever. Like
yeah. So I have been a parent in the district for a long time because my kids are 11 and a half years apart. So my daughter graduated from San Ramon Valley High School in 2007, and my son didn't graduate until 2018. So I spent a lot of time in the district doing different things, but in the last 12 years, I've been involved as a PTA president at elementary and high, Ed Fund president at middle, and then I've also been chairman of the Partial Tax Oversight Committee for 3 years, and I was co-chair of the Facilities Oversight Committee for 2 years. Oversaw the biggest building that the district has ever undertaken, and that was the $64 million three-story building at San Ramon Valley High School. I was also the design chair on the FOAC for that building, and fought really hard to get over 200 parking spaces added to the master plan, because when the master plan came about and they were ready to build that building, there was only going to be 63 parking spaces. And the kids at the high school were getting up an hour early when they had a 7:30 bell to get to school, and the stress levels of the students, especially the juniors and seniors, who of course are in their hardest part of their high school career, were having a lot of stress issues because of that. And that was a time when we were really starting to look very hard at the mental health issues that our students have, especially at the middle and high school levels. So through my position on the FOAC and through organizing countless parents and students and fellow members of the Facilities Oversight Committee, and working with Renee Morgan at the town of Danville, one of our councilwomen who is amazing, the town came up with $1.2 million to build that parking lot, and we made the building a 3-story building, and we put over 240 spaces into that campus. Made a lot of the neighbors very happy. Having teenagers in your front yard parking their cars every morning is a whole nother set of issues. So I'm very proud of that achievement.
I have to say, if I may add in there,
of course,
there's like a shadow life that a lot of students live that I think most parents don't really understand, and the parking is a perfect example. So many of my students do exactly what you've talked about, which is they'll literally arrive at school 45 minutes to an hour early because they need to get a parking spot that's not half a mile away or, a full mile away, and the neighborhood's pissed off about it because they don't want all of the kids parking there. That's why you see all the signs over near like Del Amigo and stuff. It's like, you can't park here during school hours. But the cost of that is not zero. As you're pointing out, I mean, do we really think that students would be better off getting up an hour earlier to get to school and then sit in their car? Or they say, it's not that bad. I do my homework in my car. Who wants to do homework at 6:30 in the morning in your car with your steering wheel? Like, that's not conducive to the best possible experience with education. And that's just one very small example of the pressures that are put on students that do have an effect on them that most people just don't know about.
Well, what we discovered was San Ramon Valley High School is one of the first high schools to bring in Challenge Success. This is a program out of Stanford University that helps students deal with the stress around education and educational engagement. And it's a great program. And we did a survey at the high school of our students and attempting to sort of measure their stress levels around different areas of their life. And we found that their stress levels were very high around school issues, pressure from parents. I know parking wouldn't seem to be one of those ones that's like the top 10 educational issues, but at our particular high school, for our juniors and seniors, it was a big issue. So bringing in those types of programs for the mental health of our students, what we found also in that survey was that they were not getting anywhere near enough sleep. So kids were getting like 6 hours of sleep on the average because they're doing homework, and if they have to add getting up an hour earlier in the morning to get to school, that was taking away from their sleep time.
That absolutely is reflected in my class. When I talk to people, I'm like, "Whoa, what's wrong with you? It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon." I'm like, "Oh, I'm just tired."
Right.
Why are you so tired? Like they literally get 5 and 6 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah, and that's not enough for a growing adolescent. It's scientifically proven they need to have 8 to 9 hours of sleep at night to really function at optimal.
Right.
So we really looked at a lot of those areas where there was a lot of stress for the kids and started trying to find ways to reduce that stress. And one of the things you hit on about parents not really understanding or having things kind of hidden and not seen by other people, even parents, we did this switch with students and teachers through this Challenge Success program. And basically we took 3 or 4 teachers and we gave them the schedule of the student. We picked out particular students, like a cross section of students, some that were more active, some that had a lot of extracurriculars, some that didn't. And the teachers swapped with them for 2 days. And the teachers did their schedule and followed them around and did everything that they did. And it was very, very telling, because teachers found out that it wasn't as easy to be a student as what they might have thought.
This is, to your point, I have this. I did one of my first podcasts on this type of idea, which is, look, we all show up either to work or to school with some expectation of being judged, and that's correct. I think that's the right way to live, right? To feel like somebody's going to be observing what you're doing and you should do it to the best of your ability. But what I think a lot of parents don't realize is parents are being hired for jobs that they know how to do. And even if you don't know how to do it initially, maybe you go through 6 months of sales training or a year or whatever, after a while you develop a level of proficiency. So when parents and adults in general say, I go to work too, I get judged, I get a report card, it's called like, an annual evaluation of whatever. So yes, parents do that, but they're also doing things that they know how to do already and adapting as they go. Students are, one, going to school and learning new stuff that they did not know the day before. Like if you roll into chemistry for a week, you learn stuff that week you never learned before. So they have to be incredibly flexible and absorbent with learning new things. If parents went to work every single day and learned all day long for 8 or 9 hours, brand new things that, by the way, in 2 weeks you're getting a test. And not just one test, because you're taking 6, 7 classes. So you're taking 6 or 7 tests in 2 weeks. And beyond that, you go home, right? If you go straight home, you go straight home to 2 or 3 hours worth of homework. But most likely, especially in this area, you're not going straight home. You're going to sports, you're going to choir, you're going to any of the extracurricular. And it always cracks me up because some of my highest functioning students are athletes. And their parents expect a lot from them, and I appreciate that. I think they should be pushed. But to understand how difficult it is to go to school for 8 or 9 hours and then wreck yourself athletically for another 2 or 3 hours and then go start the homework, And then parents are, of course, want students to be happy and pleased and grateful, as they should be. But it's to see just a random 40-year-old attempt that schedule. It's like, do you realize just how wrecked you'd be after 1 or 2 days of doing a basketball practice, or keeping up with a swim schedule? I mean, I had a swim coach in high school once that made us. There was a long day at practice, and he was planning on having us do 6 or 7 miles of swimming. And I laughed about it because I asked my band teacher. I should not have done it. It was disrespectful. I said, "Hey, when's the last time you ran 6 miles?" It was a terrible thing. I know, don't judge me. I was a younger man. But the point is, there's this expectation on younger people to be almost superhuman. And I'm so pleased to hear that you put adults at some point through that, because like the commitment and the diligence and the just grit that the average 16-year-old has to have if they're doing 1 or 2 sports, playing an instrument, and trying to keep a 3.5 average is tremendous.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that, and I really saw that at the high school level. It starts before that, and I think we have to start with our youngest learners and give them tools and ways that they can deal with their stress. And the other big piece of it that we tried to do, and I think more needs to be done, is educating parents. Because we found in the survey too that a lot of the pressures came from the parents, and also peers. So the kids have their own rivalries going on and their own competitions and things like that with grades and things. And there's a lot of kids who are almost that superhuman, as you put it, where they're trying to do sports and maybe another activity or 2, and then they're taking like 2 or 3 AP classes, and it's just a pressure cooker. And so it's our job to address that and to really look at ways to try to help them deal with all of this, and it maybe bring in a different perspective. And it's a continuing challenge at the high school level for sure, because this area is very demanding as far as our students are concerned. We have very high standards. Many families, have high standards for their kids, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. It's just that when it becomes a detriment to their mental health, and there's depression and anxiety and all of that comes in, then we need to take a look at what we're doing.
I so love that you made a point of saying, look, high standards are great. We just need to figure out a way that we can achieve a high standard of education, high standard of accomplishment, without creating a bunch of stress bombs that are, I do college entrance essays with students, right? I help them come up with topics, and I help them iron out ways to convey messages, because they've had real experiences. They just don't really know what the message is from the experience, so they don't know how to quite convey it without sounding, whiny. They're like, well, I don't want to just whine about this. It's like, you're not whining. You need to, but I can't tell you how many people in the essays, they'll just start talking about how they suffered from self-mutilation and, cutting themselves or doing stick and poke tattoos or just all kinds of different things that wasn't even the point of the essay. The point of the essay was completely removed. And they're like, and then I went through this dark phase where like I cut my arm every night. You're like, what? Wait, back up. What are you talking about? And of course, they don't want to complain about it because they're tough as nails, but they're coming apart at the seams to some degree. So it's like, look, high standards, not bad. We need to ask as much from our youth as we can possibly get out of them, but we need to ask that of them not at the expense of their mental health, because they're not going to be good for anyone. If they're 21, 22, suffering from substance abuse, maybe having dropped out of college and now living back at home, it's not going to be good. So yes, supporting them. I mean, that's one of the most crucial things.
Well, that's something that I was passionate about, that I continue to be passionate about, and that if I'm elected to the board, that I will continue to foster and to put forth to our parent community and to the other board members to try to have as much of our funding and things that can go to help our kids be able to cope with some of the pressures. And now we have the double whammy of COVID and all of the issues associated with that, with depression and mental health. So we need more than ever to try to direct some of the funding that we're getting from the federal government under the CARES Act to address some of these issues, because it's getting worse because of the COVID situation.
What has been done that could have been done better, in your opinion?
As far as
supporting the students through this really tricky time. And now, obviously, there's no perfect playbook here, and the information we have,
there is no playbook at all.
The information we have and the things we're allowed to do and the funding for it, they all seem to change almost on a daily basis. I mean, you could have 1 week where you're going into it thinking, okay, well, let's set up a plan in the next 3 weeks to maybe start opening up in a limited capacity. And then 2 weeks later, scratch that, it's all off the table. And then, oh, we think we're having fun, we have funds coming in, and oh, we have no funds. So again, I understand limitations, but what do you think could have been done better?
Well, I think one of the things that complicated the whole thing was that we had a retiring superintendent in the middle of this who left, and so it broke a lot of the continuity. I'm very hopeful about the new choice for superintendent, and he seems to be very communicative with the parents. I think there was a lot of back and forthing, and as you said, there were a lot of changes that happened every week or every few days. Things would change. And I think the board, initially voted to, there were a couple board members that wanted to vote to put the kids back in school right away. And then 2 days later, they had to reverse themselves because basically the mandate said they can't do that. So I think it's been a really hard situation to try to deal with on all levels. And I think funding continues to be a problem. We have funding issues aside from COVID. We have declining enrollment in the school district, and I think it's going to be exacerbated by the COVID situation, because I think some people are going to choose to take their kids out of the school because they're not able to get what they feel like they need. And that's really unfortunate. There's also been a small faction of parents who are campaigning to have parents not donate to education funds at the schools.
I'm sorry, back up. There are parents campaigning to stop other parents from donating to education.
Yes, because they feel...
Okay, walk me through this one.
Yeah, well, having been an Ed Fund president and also highly involved with academic boosters at San Ramon Valley High School and an Ed Fund president at Charlotte Wood, I know exactly how important that funding is. And basically the theory is because they weren't getting what they wanted, i.e. their kids in school, full time, that the only way to get the district's attention is to not give any money to our ed funds at the school sites, which is so counterintuitive to making anything better, because those school site ed funds are what pay for, at the high school at San Ramon, for example, 17 extra sections a year of class, which means that electives and more classes, smaller class sizes are possible, more choices for our kids. So crippling those funds actually weakens the public school system tremendously. And unfortunately, a lot of people think that that's a good way to try to control the outcome of what's going on now. And there is no controlling the outcome of what's going on right now. And I think people have a hard time wrapping themselves around that reality. We are constricted by the mandates and whatever the county health directives are that we have to follow in order to get our kids in school. And so the big topic now is we want our kids back in school as quickly as possible. And I do believe right now that the district is doing everything that they can to make that happen. I just think there's a lot of people who are not happy with that and think that they should be able to change it in some way, that the district or the superintendent can change it in some way. Wow. And right now, today, that is not possible.
Right.
But
you're going to have problems. I mean, look at the businesses that are going down in downtown Danville. If there was some way to keep the business alive, they would be doing it. I mean, we're constrained by things.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean that we sit quiet and don't work towards the goal of getting our kids back, but we have to, there's so many pieces to it. You know, we have to consider our teachers also. And, you know, a lot of the teachers in the teachers union has been vilified because parents look at them as being the obstacle, and they are not the obstacle. They have families, they have health issues, they have considerations of their own. I don't know any teacher that doesn't want to be back teaching in the classroom.
Yeah, it's terrible. Okay, I don't want to say terrible, but it's extremely difficult to do remote education. I mean, I did it all through the spring, and good Lord, trying to engage students, trying to get them to be accountable, trying to get them inspired or excited about something is extremely difficult to do. If you did one Zoom class or one Google Meet class and then one in-person class, so you could develop a rapport, so you could have a real conversation, I could see that working. But if you're all on Zoom or you're all on Google Meet, man, it's a tricky situation.
Well, and of course for our youngest learners, it's the most difficult. You know, my son is taking classes at DVC, and so he as a young child, you know, had ADD, and he was had an IEP all the way through his school career, which helped him tremendously. But he does very well with online at this point in his life. But he's older,
right?
And he's had more time to practice, and he can hold his attention now. But when you're talking about special needs kids, special ed kids who have attention issues and who have other services that they need delivered, it's extremely difficult, and we really have to focus on making sure that we get those kids back in school. I have no problem with that. I'm totally for that. But we have to do it. We have to follow the rules, and we have to do it safely. So I think it's coming. I think we will be back in not too long a time, based on the communications that are coming out of the district and the steps that they're taking. But I think patience is wearing thin, and I think a lot of parents are just really, really fed up and really want to have this over with. And unfortunately, you know, we don't have a magic wand. We can't make that happen today.
Right. Now, you did mention something I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned that even before COVID, we had funding issues, primarily spurring from declining enrollment. So what do you see as the biggest push for people to pull themselves pull their children, out of the public education system? I mean, I know my wife and I moved here specifically because we like the education system, and we had kids, or at the time when we moved here, we just had a little baby, but we have 3 boys now, and we have removed ourselves from the public education, even though we continue to pay our property taxes diligently and believe in education. But it wasn't working for us. What do you think are the biggest factors that are pushing people to remove their kids from public education in this area?
Well, I think the declining enrollment has different factors that affect it. The biggest factor basically comes down to numbers. It comes down to population and demographics. Having sat on the Facilities Oversight Committee, which is what we do, is we oversee all of the building and construction of new schools and buildings and improvements, capital improvements to all the school structures. And those are paid for through Measure D funds. And Measure D is a bond issue that was approved by the voters, and it has very specific uses that you use it for, and it's only for facilities. And what we were shown when I was on the Facilities Oversight Committee was that there was already an expected attrition of new kids coming into the district because of the demographics. There weren't as many families. We don't have a lot more space, so we're not adding as many new homes and subdivisions where families move in. So we expected to have some attrition from that, and that was, they did a study where they study like years down the road, what are we looking at? But I think we got a big surprise when they looked at it just recently at the last board meeting and released the numbers, and it was like 1,100 kids less in the school district, which is a lot.
If I may ask, my children go to St. Isidore's, the
Yes.
little elementary school. There's a wait list there. So I understand that there may be fewer families, but do you think there's something going on in the public education right now, let's say at the elementary level, that's leading people to move to this area, spend more money on housing because housing's not cheap here, and then
No.
spend additional funds to take their kids to private school because again, there are obviously plenty of elementary aged kids to fill St. Isidore and then some because again, there's a wait list. But then at the school my son went to, Green Valley, obviously they keep saying, "Oh, well, we are down in enrollment. There aren't enough families." Well, you had us, and then you lost us, along with 5 other kids from my son's class, for other reasons. But again, what do you think is driving that?
I think that there's a lot of issues with communication. I think there's issues with funding. Our schools here in the San Ramon Valley, the way that the LCFF is configured, the way the state funds us. You mentioned property taxes, and it's really interesting because people think traditionally, back in the day, property taxes did fund schools. And the school board set the property tax limits for their given area. They had that much power. The state changed all that, and now there's LCFF and
what's LCSF?
the local control funding formula.
Gotcha.
So it's the formula that the state uses by which they dole out funds to individual school districts. So because of our demographic, the state sets a base limit, a base amount that they give every school district, no matter who you are. And then after that, if you have a higher percentage of English language learners, foster, homeless, underprivileged basically, then you get like 20% more over the top of the base that they give everybody. So San Ramon falls into this sort of space where we don't have a lot of children that qualify for that. We have some, but it leaves us at a big funding deficit from, say, other school districts who have, because, and rightfully so, the state wants to give the funds to the school districts that have these children who they have to put more energy and time and who deserve to be helped. But it does leave us, the base amounts that the state's giving out is not enough to really provide the kind of quality education that we want to provide here and that parents have come to expect from this school district. So that's been an issue ongoing for a long time. So then it becomes a matter of what do you do with the funding that you have and where do you put those funds? And that's where I really want to go in and look at the whole budget as a whole to see where everything is actually going, because there's different pots of money that come from different places. There's money that comes from the state for CTE, which is the vocational training programs that are in the schools, the classes that we like, auto tech, like culinary arts, because as we were talking about, every child does not fit into that academic square, that box, right? So what do you do with the kids who maybe aren't college material or choose to go into a vocation or another profession where what kind of help and support are we giving them? So we get funding for that. Where that funding goes, we need to take a look at.
I'm so glad. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm so glad you brought that up. This has always been one of my things. Now, again, I work in test prep, so you'd think that it was absolutely my position that absolutely every kid should go to college and everyone should do their absolute best and you should spend all this money on test prep. No, that's not true. And believe it or not, I very much enjoy woodworking. And for a period of time, I was doing woodworking professionally on the side from tutoring, and I love it. I have no problem with it, and I could see making a living and living a life around woodworking. And I think that you see the cost of education going up. I think you see the impacted nature of our public universities, right? So all of the UCs and the CSUs as well,
Absolutely.
unless you want to go to like Bakersfield or something, and I don't think a lot of people want to go there. But as the funding crunch for the universities gets put on, and they have to allow more out of state, not that many. I think this is a big misconception. If you look at UCLA, about 50% of the population of UCLA is just Southern California students. And then another, I think 25 on almost 30% of the population is Northern California. Then you have about 15% out of state, and you have about 5% international. So when people talk about like, oh, they increased the out of state by 10%, they're not saying 10% of the overall. They're saying just, I went from 15% to like 16.5% or something. But the point is, as you have more of those students coming in, and as you have fewer spots for California students, we have to look, obviously, if people want to go to college, they have to look either to JCs to do an associate's degree, or obviously transfer in, which is harder for some students, or they go straight to a 4-year school that's private. And the astronomical cost of private schools is, I mean, it's almost unthinkable. My favorite local one to kind of beat on, is USF, because USF, to me, I don't think bad people, bad school, none of that. Absolutely a great school. You're living in one of the most expensive places in the United States. I think the tuition for USF is over $50,000 a year, and it's not like USF has this engineering program like MIT or Caltech that's second only to like one or, whatever. You have just normal programs there, like sociology or, philosophy, things of that nature. And you have students then coming out of there with this astronomical debt, right? And that's in my opinion, where a lot of the debt starts coming from. So when I look at the average student, or some students, in the districts, and they say, okay, well, we have to get college enrollment up. We're at 95% of students going to a 2-year or 4-year university. We want to hit 100. I always say, wait, like, think of the cost that you're asking this family or this student to personally take on, and what is the benefit that they're going to have? Could we even entertain the idea that it would be possible for them to get a good education at, say, San Ramon, and have a foot in the door for something that they wouldn't have to go to a 4-year university to complete? Is there a way that we could provide vocational training, or at least set up mentorships, or journeyman apprenticeships and things like that with different labor unions? I mean, it sounds like there is supposed to be funding for those types of things, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of emphasis to make good on that.
There's not.
Why? Why?
Well, I think it's a matter of how big of a piece of a pie you're willing to give that, because I think in this area that we're very driven as far as, going to the elite colleges, getting into the best colleges. It's all focused on academics, and that's the best way to be successful. And I personally, my background is not a traditional one at all, and so I have a particular soft spot myself for the CTE program, and if I'm elected as a board member, it's definitely something that I will be looking into and championing, because I do believe that there are lots of kids who are being left behind because they don't fit the mold of what everybody here says, or a lot of people here say, is successful. I think the district has been, focused, rightfully so. We want to have high academic standards. We want to be able to supply our kids with the kind of education that can get them into an Ivy League school if that's what they choose to do. But what about the kids that don't choose that or don't fit that? And I had some really interesting conversations just recently, because I've been endorsed by the Contra Costa Labor Union, Labor Council, and also the Builders and Tradesmen. And one of their questions to me in my interviews in both cases was, what are you going to do for kids who, we need people who build things, who are steam fitters, who are journeymen in all kinds of different vocations. We need people in our profession. This is what we do. We build buildings and cities and houses, and we need people like that. What are you going to do for these kids so that they can be successful also and maybe move into one of these areas? So it's a particular hot button for me because of my own background. And also, I know my son, when he was at the high school, well, he didn't choose to. He is in college and he is going to get his degree, and that's great. But one of his hobbies and something that he totally loves and enjoys is he had the ability to take auto tech for 3 years at San Ramon High School. It's the only high school in the whole school district that has an auto tech program, and it struggled and struggled. He learned so much, and he's the president of his own car club now, and he's totally into cars, and he's working on his own car all the time because he was introduced to that at the high school. He wouldn't have had that otherwise.
Right.
So we want to raise well-rounded kids, not one-dimensional. So it's important that we're able to offer all those things, and I think the district really struggles with that. Another area that they struggle with is, the special education program, and making sure that we're delivering the kind of services that those kids need. So there's all these different facets that I've become keenly aware of because my son has been in special education, as I said, his whole school career. So I have a lot of experience with that and with CTE. And as far as declining enrollment, you were speaking about, the UCs increasing the number of outside students they take. Well, the district can choose to do that also. It becomes a little problematic, but they can open their boundaries and allow students from other areas to come and go to school here.
I believe Dublin High does that as well, don't they?
I'm sure, I don't know for sure that they do, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. A lot of districts do that. And traditionally, San Ramon has been we have done it a little bit, but it's been pretty closed. It hasn't been really, the borders haven't really been open that widely to students from outside. And it can be problematic for a lot of different reasons, depending on the needs of the students and where they're coming from and how it all works. But that's one way to bring maybe some more student population back to the district.
Right, and it's so clear that there are solutions to all of the problems, but so many of the solutions people are against. For instance, one mom that I'm working with worked with her son, and she said, "Hey, look, we're funding a safe grad night for the class of 2021. Would you consider making a donation? We could put your face in the calendar, or we could do whatever." I'm like, "Look, no calendar. I don't want any of that." She's like, "I'll make a donation. It's great. I love the kids. They're great." And so I do, and I ask her, what's the budget for grad night? Apparently, it's about $100,000. It's like, wait. Don't you just need to get a location and like a blow-up slide, somebody to like a magician, a coffee barista? Like that's pretty much what my grad night had, and it's so complex. And if you don't have the level of parent participation, then all of a sudden you have to start hiring people to also help. And so one of the solutions is always, hey, we can hire outside help, right? We can hire outside help for fundraisers. We can hire outside help to help us with these big specific events, or parents can get involved. Now, parents a lot of times are like, look, I'm already donating to the Ed Fund. I'm already doing this. I'm already doing that. You guys have hit me up for this fun run. I've done these things. I can't volunteer my whole weekend as well. So we have a solution. It's to hire, but nobody wants to pay for hiring, and nobody wants to volunteer and take up the mantle as well. So it's one of those things where I think a lot of people aren't really understanding the struggle of providing all of these specific events. And again, with the safe grad night, everybody wants a safe grad night. And nobody wants kids at somebody's house jumping off a roof into a pool. All of these things are so important to the community, but understanding the nitty-gritty of what it takes to provide them for our kids seems to be totally out of whack. So do you think there would be benefit to changing the type of communication that we have with the populace and saying, hey, look, we have we got to do something with this problem, right? Say it's enrollment. It's like, all right, look, here's the deal. we can increase the number of people from outside the area, or we can ask for more money, or we can do more fundraisers, or we can get more whatever. But these are the issues we're having, because in my limited experience with the public ed and the education, there wasn't a lot of discussion. There wasn't a lot of warning. There wasn't a lot of, hey, we're going to give this company access to your 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds. People that we don't know that work for this company will come in and sell your kids on this fundraiser, and they're going to come home and harass you every night to log on and make a donation. And we have to do that, because in the absence of that, you guys have to pay us more money, or you have to help us volunteer for these things. But again, there was no communication there. That's the thing that always caught me and my wife off guard. What do you think could be done about that?
So you hit on a couple things. I hope I could. I hope I can get them all straight in my head. Okay,
there's the paper there as well, if you need to write anything down.
Okay, so you're talking to the right. I don't know. Maybe I'm the wrong person. You're talking to the right person about grad night. Okay, because grad night at San Ramon Valley High School is a 40-year tradition, and it's put on by senior parents. And I personally have chaired grad night twice. And I also have worked on 6 or 7 other grad nights as president of the PTA. So I have very strong feelings about grad night. And yes, it's true. It's a $100,000 budget.
Wow.
And it's a very complex thing to put on. It takes a year. It takes a year of planning, and it takes about 140 to 150 parents. But I'll tell you what. We always have sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle, but because of the community that's been created at San Ramon specifically, and also Cal High does it to a different degree, it's something that, because of the community that we have, it's something that is really, really important to us and our kids as senior parents, when you get to be a senior parent. And the money that is raised in order to do it comes from ticket sales, but it also comes from donations from the community, and it comes from donations from other parents. And we get a lot of vendors in the community who have restaurants, who have all kinds of services that they donate their services or whatever to our kids, or they donate tons of food. It's an act of love, and it's part of what makes that particular high school so unique. The same reason that we have, we were the only ones that had really a homecoming parade that goes through town. It's being able to hold on to some of those traditions and values. And while it seems maybe outrageous to people who are sitting on the outside, it's something that our kids, when they become freshmen in high school, they look forward to that whole 4 years that they're going to have a grad night. And parents build sets and do all kinds of crazy things. And I just think it's a really wonderful way for them to be able to end their high school career, and it's something very memorable. And I'm a big supporter of it, because I've seen how much joy it brings to these kids.
Absolutely. So what, if I may ask, and again, I realize you're saying it's complex. With that many volunteers and with that much planning, how do you arrive at the $100,000 ticket?
Well, we've done it many years in a row, and so we know a lot about what the costs are, and it varies by class depending on what the theme is. There's a tremendous amount that's donated from parents. For example, we have builders, contractors who help build the sets and things like that, and they donate lumber and they donate their time. And
so the cost is actually far greater than $100,000. That's if you take into account all of the pizzas that are donated, and the time and the labor and the actual building materials and things of that nature.
Yes, it probably is. But what's the beautiful thing about it is that it brings together a whole community. And when we have the preview, the day of graduation, we do a preview for the community. You would not believe how many people come, and people are calling the school asking, when is the preview? We want to come and see it. It's become like a community event. It's one of the things that makes Danville and the high school sort of unique. Maybe it's a little bit of a throwback to to back in the day, when they did the homecoming parade and the homecoming king and queen and the big football game and the grad night, and it all kind of goes in together to make up what makes this particular school unique. And like I said, I know Cal High has their own event, and they also do something very similar, and it's done on campus. All of this is done on campus. We don't go outside to any other facilities, and the district is nice enough to let us use the facilities after school is out. And we build there for a week, the buildings and the sets and everything. And Monte Vista has their own version of grad night. They usually go to the USS Hornet, and they also have a celebration. So everybody does it a little differently that's unique to their school, but it's something that we do want to keep our kids safe. And we don't want them on the road, and we do want to keep them, under lock and key all night, having fun. And it's not like entertaining a group of 10-year-olds or 6-year-olds. You're talking about 18-year-olds. You're not going to have the jumpy slide. And
no, we did. We had a slide when I was in high school.
Oh, we had a slide too, along with the magician and the hair salon and the henna tattoo and the massage and. Yeah. Right, and the gaming and the dance hall and
right,
all the food and 20 other things. So it's very memorable for them, and I think it's a tradition that we want to keep going. And it may change. I mean, I came back to chair Grad Night 2020, and we started putting it all together, and then we had to take it all apart because it didn't happen. And I don't know what's going to happen in 2021.
Well, I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen tomorrow.
No, I totally agree with
you.
The
sky could turn orange. We could be on a Star Wars set tomorrow. I have no idea.
That's what it feels like, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And getting back to what you said, you really hit on something for me about communication. My experience, because I've been working very closely at school sites with administrators. When you're the member of the site council, and you're a member of academic boosters, and you're president of the PTA, and you're president, and you're on the parent advisory group, you are able to bring a lot of people together to talk about different things, and you work really closely with the principal of the high school. And when it came to communications about from the district about what they were doing and the reasons they were doing it, you hit on exactly one of my biggest issues, and that is the controlling of the narrative all the time and not really telling parents, this is how it is, this is what our choices are, this is why we're doing this. An example is when I was at the high school the last year, the district decided they needed to make cuts to the sections that they were giving they give the principals at the school so many sections to write their master schedule. Sections are a class, right? Mm-hmm. So at the last minute, usually these are done in March and April, right? Because for the next year, because it takes a while to plan a master schedule, April, May.
And you have to employ teachers, you have to have families.
Exactly.
That plan
That's why it has to be done so early.
Sure.
Because if you're not going to employ the teacher, you have to pink slip, and it's got to be done early and all that. Well, at the last minute, they cut a bunch of sections out of our schedule and never told anybody. They just, one day, the principal comes to me and said, and Nancy Dates is president of the Academic Boosters, and in her organization are the ones that supplement the sections from parent donations. And it was like, what happened? And I ended up going to the assistant superintendent and saying, what are you doing here? We're caught. We don't have enough sections for our master schedule. We don't have enough money to supplement, because we've already supplemented so many through academic boosters. And there was no communication about that was going to happen or why they did it or whatever. And it was the same thing about when they introduced the PLIs, the personal learning initiatives. That the new superintendent brought with him. There were like 10 initially. They were wanting to cut the 7th period for high school. And instead of telling parents, the reason that we want to do this is because of budgetary issues. We really need to make cuts somewhere, and this is a place that we think maybe we might want to cut. They didn't do that. They put it out in such a way that it made it look like they were trying to improve students' ability to access other ways of getting educated, which was part of the initiative, you know, College Connect and things like that, where kids can take classes outside of high school at other institutions, and they were going to allow certain ones, and it would still be able to be put on their transcript. A certain number, it's limited on what they can do. But instead of saying we need to make budget cuts and we're looking at cutting the 7th period, that's not how it was put out. And it was just maddening. Like, we had to fight. That's one of my big fights that we did win, and that was to save the 7th period.
Well
and
done.
Maybe people think that that's not important. Why do we have to have a 7th period? For kids who are in VAPA, and kids who are in athletics, and kids that have that want to have an elective, that are in music and in drama and choir and all of those, they need that 7th period if they're going to maintain a schedule to meet their academic requirements. Because, as you said, a lot of these kids are really high achievers, and you want to be able to supply them with what they need to be able to be successful. Everybody doesn't take a 7th period, and that's fine. It also affected only having singleton classes. So if there's a singleton and your schedule doesn't match up with it, then you don't get to take it, or you got to give up something else.
Singleton being, like, say I wanted to take physics and there was only one physics
Yes.
class and it was only 3rd period,
Yes.
and I also wanted to take choir, or I
Yes.
wanted to take pre-calc, and that lined up with the physics class.
Yes.
If you don't have an alternate physics class, it's over.
Right. So I have experienced many times also being on the other end, working with administrators and dealing with issues at the district where the district administration under the old superintendent was very, very focused on controlling the narrative. So they would try to control what the principal would communicate to me, or what he would communicate out to the parent community, and wanted to know what I was saying, and then what he was. It got a little crazy. So,
Well, I feel like okay, let me ask instead of telling you. Do you think that there is a lack of desire to have open accountability? Because, okay, if you're going to go to parents, you're going to go to everyone and say, okay, everyone, look, here's the deal. We're in a bad spot. We're going to cut the 7th period, or we're considering cutting the 7th period because we have budgetary issues. Then there are going to be a lot of, okay, wait. How do we have budgetary issues? Why do we have them? What can we do about it? You have to engage in a conversation. But instead of doing that, I find what a lot of people do, and perhaps it's just human nature, is they say, okay, look, we're going to sell a substandard situation as an asset. People always do this. So they're saying, hey, look, we're not cutting 7th period. I mean, it's gone, obviously. We're not cutting it. We're replacing it with a better, more flexible option. You're welcome. Aren't you happy that we have that?
That's exactly what they did. That's you captured it perfectly. That's exactly what they said.
So what is it? Literally that they just don't want to have they don't want to engage the community and the parents and the principals? I mean, it seems to me always that the best solution is to communicate effectively, clearly, and honestly. And it's not always the political solution, right? There are plenty of times
True.
when I have to have conversations with parents that I know are not going to go well, but I have to tell them, look, your student is not doing the work, or this is how I record all of the homeworks, this is the progress of the homeworks, and they missed this one or that, and nobody's happy about that conversation. But the alternative is I become part of the lie. And the lie, of course, is, hey, this is going really well. We should all be happy about it. Well, that's when you get cutting the 7th period. We should all be happy. No, we shouldn't be happy about it. This is not good. And we're doing it for reasons that are not honest, right? You're not trying to improve the educational experience. You're trying to cover the fact that we have come up short in some other aspect of our management. So why are they doing that?
That's a good question. I think it's mainly to try to control the situation. It's try to not have as little pushback as possible. I think this board has been together for a long, long time. Most of the people that are on it have been here long term. The incumbent that I'm running against, 20 years.
What is it? Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you again.
That's
I keep
okay.
doing this. I'm inspired with questions. I've wanted to ask since you walked in the door. If you're on a school board for 20 years, what are you doing? Like, why are you so, I mean, there will come a point in my life where I realize, hey, look, I have done the best I can for my students. I've done the best for my community, or say my children. They go into the employment field. I've only ever tutored. I graduated from Berkeley. I started tutoring that week. I know my limitations. Okay, if they come to me and they say, hey, I'm getting this corporate job and these are the issues I'm running into, I know now, if they come to me and say that, I know now today that I will say, hey, look, this was not the world I maneuvered. I maneuvered specific client relationships. I was an educator. I don't know the corporate world. And the world has changed so much. I mean, 20 years ago, there wasn't an iPhone. 20 years ago, I was graduating from high school, right? Like I didn't have a cell phone for 3 years after that. Now, I mean, look, everybody knows what's now. It's a far cry from that. How could you think that after 20 years, you still have the best read on the situation and the best solutions when the world has changed so much? Why would you want to keep doing that?
Well, you would have to ask him that. I can't answer that question for him, but I can tell you, I'll tell you one of the big reasons. Nobody ran against him. It's only been with the onset of COVID and all of the turmoil around education as far as funding and parents being unhappy about different things that it's gotten people's attention. Because I think most people that, it's a big school district. We're a unified school district. There's like 32,000 kids. I mean, everybody doesn't pay attention to what's going on their school board. And it's a really, really important thing for many reasons, whether you have kids in school or not. If you want to have a strong community, you need to have strong schools. And, aside from the fact that we all know that the students that are in school now are our future, and the better job that we do educating them and giving them the tools they need to become global citizens, the better off the world is going to be. Now, I know that's the big picture view, but I think this board has become complacent in a lot of ways. I think they have served well, but I think the time now for change is definitely here. And my perspective and my background could not diverge more clearly from who sits in that seat now.
So walk me through that. Let's say we wave a magic wand and Shelley Clark is elected to the school board. Great. So you're saying you couldn't diverge more from what's been going on. So what do you do? Like, what is that big thing that you get after, like in the first, let's say, 100 days? Let's just use the cliche.
Well, if you look at my platform, it talks about transparency, one of the areas that you and I talked about. I am a very straight up person. I'm no nonsense, I'm to the point, and I don't sugarcoat things, and I will always tell people the truth, whatever it looks like, even if it's not what they want to hear. I'm also somebody who is, if I see something that I feel needs to be changed or is wrong, I will stand up and fight to have it changed, or do the work necessary to bring people together to collaborate to make the change. I was one of the people that was on the homework committee, which started out because, again, going back to mental health and emotional issues with our students in 2018, there were, especially at the middle and high school levels, lots of different levels of homework, some of which were really onerous to our students, but there was not really the policy that was in place at the time, if there was one, really didn't have any teeth in it. So this committee was formed with parents, teachers, and some admin, and the district ran it, and it was supposed to be 4 meetings, and we were going to come up with a new policy. Well, 10 meetings later, there were some pretty intense negotiations with the teachers to put in place a policy that limited the amount of homework that could be given at any given time to elementary, middle, and high school. It changed the whole homework policy for the whole school district. And that was not easy to come by for a lot of different reasons. Teachers had their concerns, rightfully so. Parents had their concerns. To try to put something together so that our kids could benefit was huge. And that policy is still in place today. So mental health is a huge one for me, social emotional learning. Transparency and communication is huge, and it's exactly what we talked about. Tell people the truth. If you don't have money, if it's a money issue, if you don't have budget, if you're not getting what you need or whatever, let's tell parents that. Let's not try to sugarcoat it or make it seem like something it's not. Now, they've changed. We have a new superintendent. We have a new communications person at the district who I know well, who I worked with at Charlotte Wood. The other thing that I think that I can bring also is that I have ongoing relationships with a lot of people at the district already. I've been endorsed by the teachers union, and I feel that one of the issues at the district that I really want to try to remedy is that the relationship between the teachers and the administration in the school board and the district needs some repair.
What do you see as the big issue there? Because I would assume, I mean, I think any parent would assume it's like, hey, you guys are all on the same team, so you just...
I mean, yes, they should be on the same team. I just think there's a level of distrust and animosity that exists in that relationship that I don't think really it's not apparent to everybody. I think it comes out of some of the decisions the board has made and some of the negotiations. I don't think they would be so anxious to endorse an incoming candidate when the incumbent is running if there wasn't an issue there.
Well, naturally. And I mean, if I'm a teacher, and you know, as we were talking about before, if I'm involved as a teacher, or I'm on the teacher's side, and then you find out, you know, in the 11th hour that the number of classes is all of a sudden being cut without any communication, of course I'm going to have a very large level of distrust. And I would be very thankful that there were people like you that went to bat and fought for, again, say the 7th period. But why would anyone trust that? I mean, you have to have a level of credibility and reliability if you're going to lead people. And if you don't do that, if you say one thing and then do another, or if you don't say anything and then just act in a way that's obviously counter to the relationship and the stated mission of educating people, young people, why would you trust? I mean, so again, to your point, I couldn't agree more. You wouldn't, if there was no issue there, they would already say like, well, no, he's been doing a fine job. We're very happy with it.
That's not the case.
Not the case.
So if you don't have a good relationship with your teachers, how do you improve education? I mean, they're the life's blood of the schools. They are the ones that are in front of our kids every day, and we need to be able to collaborate together. And I think now there needs to be a change, and I feel like I can make that happen. I feel like I have that relationship, and I'm familiar with a lot of the people that are in the admin in the district, have good relationship with them. I work with them. You know, a lot of them have been promoted out of middle schools and high schools, right, to work in the district office. So I feel really comfortable with that, and I feel like there has to be a level of mutual respect that goes both ways. And I think at this point, you know, I can't speak for the teachers, but I can just say that as an observer that I don't think that exists right now. And that's really, really important, especially now.
Right. One thing that I've heard people say, which it struck me, but I'll let you respond to it, was that parents said, well, you know, Shelley doesn't have kids in the district, so she's kind of out of the loop. So I don't think she's a good option. And I'll just put that out there. Go.
Yeah, that's been said. And I've never been out of the loop because I have been involved even when after my son left in 2019 at the high school, and in 2020 at the high school. And I've always kept in touch with, I have very deep ties to the parent community here. And I don't think that the thing that I can bring that somebody that maybe has kids in school might not have is that I have experienced all 12 years of school. So I have deep knowledge about elementary, middle, and high school. And as our kids advance and get older and advanced exponentially, it goes so fast, it gets more and more complex from elementary to high. So I have the experience of all of those that I can bring, and I have the time and the passion and the commitment to be able to devote a huge amount of my time, because of the place that I am in my life, to this position. Because this position is not, oh, you go to a school board meeting, twice a month, and maybe you do some other stuff, a few things, during the interim time. It's a big commitment. In 2018, when Denise Jennison vacated her seat before the end of her term, there were 19 people that applied to be appointed to that position, and I was one of the final 4. So I feel like I have the passion and the commitment and the knowledge and experience. Everything that I've done in my professional life and in my, parent leadership roles has really prepared me for this position now.
Right. And it always, on top of all of that, it always seemed odd to me that it was like, okay, would you call a lawyer who's still in law school? No.
That's a good analogy.
You'd want somebody that was seasoned, that understood the ropes, that had been through many different situations and had accumulated knowledge and experience in relationships. You don't want them, but just because somebody has, say you still had a senior.
Yes.
Would you all of a sudden be infinitely more qualified than if your senior had just graduated? It's like, oh, no. Come June, Shelley's out. It's out. She's done. Right? Like, it just didn't hold water. It seems so odd to me. And, of course, everything you said. You have, it seems decades of experience. You've gone through all of the different grades and the deep ties and relationships. Without those, you're not going to have good communication. Because people need to start coming to you on day one and saying, all right, look, Shelley, I know you're going to listen to me. This is the deal, right? This is what's going on with me in my little area of this massive, massive machine. And without that kind of rapport already in place, it's not that you could never get it, but it may take time, right? And we don't have a lot of time to sit down. Again, the sun is red. Like, we gotta go.
Exactly.
It's getting a little weird. If I may, one of the biggest questions I've had for you, which you almost touch on, was, why are you doing this? like you're saying, look, I have the time in my life and I have all this experience and where I am, and it's like, oh my, if I were you, I'd be in a Winnebago driving down 101, maybe not 101, that's terrifying, but like Route 66, right? I'm going to Radiator Springs. I don't know, like doing something else, but you're trying to get people to pick you to be the steward of the education for the next generation. Why do that? Why not just gracefully tap out? You've done your part.
My husband asked me the same question.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah. Well, he's probably, other than me, he's the one that's most affected by my decision. So how can I explain? I love this community. And I have derived so much satisfaction from all of the leadership roles that I have held. And I have a special place in my heart for the students in this school district. And I feel so strongly. And, it wasn't that easy of a decision to make, but this is going to sound maybe a little bit trite, but I felt like I was called to do it. And I've had many, many parents who I've known for years say, you need to do this. We need you to do this. We want you to do this. I'm talking over a long period of time. So in 2018, I did, I could have run then, but I was coming off of being grad night chair, PTA president, site council, 5 other things, serving on 2 district committees. I needed
just
to have
just that.
I just
Okay.
needed a little bit of a break. And when I'll tell you what triggered me to really decide that I was going to do this was when the board in whatever it was, March, when the pandemic was getting full throttle, and they decided to give the retroactive raises and the bonus to the outgoing superintendent and the executive cabinet at the school district because it was tradition, and this is the way they do it because the teachers had a raise earlier in the year. And normally they have this Me Too thing where when the teachers get a raise, then the admin gets a raise, and the...
Okay, so wait. Let's back up here. So the teachers earlier in the school year got a raise.
Yes.
And here we are in March. We're getting locked down in our houses. It's all bad.
Well, they were at an $8 million deficit then, but it's gone up since then.
Okay, so we're locked in our houses. We have an $8 million deficit. And the superintendent got a retroactive pay raise.
Right, and a bonus. And then he left.
We're $8 million in debt, in deficit.
Well, some
not
of
debt,
that,
but deficit.
Yeah, some of that may have been, it probably was written, some of it may have been written into his contract. But nevertheless, the board unanimously decided to go ahead with that because the Me Too part of their philosophy and the way they've always traditionally done it was it's only equitable if the teachers get a raise, then everybody else gets a raise, or the executives get a raise.
But isn't that benefiting off of the dues that the teachers pay to the teachers union and the negotiators?
Well, think about what the amount of money is that most teachers make percentage-wise versus what administrators make.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The superintendent made over all compensation in over $400,000.
Yeah,
last
when
year.
you count all compensation, yeah.
$400,000. Isn't that more than the president?
Well, it's
like the president of the U.S.
Yeah, it's as much as the president. Yeah, it's more than the mayor of San Francisco.
This is the superintendent.
Yeah.
Of education here.
Yeah.
Ex-superintendent, rather.
Yes, and so then he left with his pockets padded. And
so the school board voted. They confirmed this course of action.
They unanimously voted
in the midst of COVID.
Right, after it all had gotten started. And I know that's the way they've always done it, and I know to them it might have seemed equitable, but at the time, the world had turned completely upside down, and they were sticking with the way that they always have done it, and I declared that morning. I was like, okay, that kind of put me over the edge. I needed to do something, and I felt like I had the experience that I had and the time that I spent all these years putting into the schools and learning about the schools and working in them and advocating for our students, that it was time for me to take the next step. So whatever the outcome is, I will know that, I did what I needed to do, and I felt like if I didn't do it, that I would regret it. Well, you really have to look at it and go, is this something, if I don't do this, is this something that I want to live with? So I decided, no, I'm going to do it. It's not easy. Campaigning is very difficult, especially in the age of COVID, because you can't really get out and touch people. But I'm doing my best to try to get the message out there.
Well, thank you. Thank you, because especially knowing the stresses that my clients, my families, as I call them, my families are under financial stress, and the community in general, seeing local business owners just going under, and it really crushes me, because there are a couple very specific local businesses in Danville that I'm very close to and mean a lot to me, and seeing that they're going to have to close their doors, and being with them through the journey of building a business and building the community around that business and being part of that community. understanding how painful it is and how that's not something you can just flip back on like a light switch. If you have a successful restaurant, it took years and years to get that up and running with a solid foundation, and within a few months it's gone. To know that that's what's going on in the community in parallel with a superintendent making that kind of money and people on the board, current board, agreeing that that's the correct course of action. That yes, maybe this is something that we've always done, and although this is a bad situation, we shouldn't stop with tradition. Come on. We're locked in our house. What do you mean we need to stick with tradition? Let's put everything on the table. Let's put everything.
At the very least, they should have frozen that until later, at a different time or whatever, to really reconsider it. And they chose not to do that. And that just was not, it didn't set well with the parent community, and it certainly set me thinking that, okay, it's time for me to step up and use what I've learned and to try to make a change. So that's what got me here. That and sort of being called to do this. It's always been something, I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I've had a lot of parents urging me to do it for quite a while, a lot of whom are working on my campaign now, because I'm like, well, if you want me to do it, then you're going to have to do it too. And they stepped up.
Right.
These are relationships that I've had since my son was in kindergarten. So it's amazing what can happen when a community comes together.
Right. Well, hopefully they come together around you.
Well,
I know you are short on time, so I will absolutely let you go. But Shelley Clark, obviously, the Shelley Clark.
Shelley for Shelley for SRVUSD.com.
Great, and I will again put that in the link here.
That would be great
on the podcast.
And
thank you.
Get on the website and learn all about me.
Perfect.
All right.
And again, thank you so much for coming.
Thank
I do appreciate it.
For the
Have a good day,
opportunity.
everybody.
You too.
Absolutely.